Welcome to our panel focusing on how NFTs will enhance the digital entertainment and consumer experience. We've all heard of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We probably own a few, and a few of us have even minted some. But the broader implications for the retail and gaming industry are going to be fairly significant, looking at new ways of unlocking consumer experiences and helping brands develop deeper relations with their important audiences. Joining us today is a star-studded panel, beginning with Sean Zhang, co-founder of Talon Esports. We have Nicholas Chan, the co-founder of Refinable, Doris Fong, the head of creative industries at InvestHK. Hello, Doris, and thank you for your sponsorship. We have Dr. Owais Shaikh. Apologies if I didn't get the KH properly. He is legal advisor with Quick Trust, and the session will be moderated by Kiril, Popov, a senior innovation strategist. So over to the panel to talk about how NFTs will enhance the digital entertainment and consumer experience.
Thanks, Walter, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks, EmergentX, for bringing us together and giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. My background is in retail research. I also co-founded a digitally native outerwear brand. So NFTs are particularly interesting to me as a way to extend what brands can do and how they can engage with their users and consumers. And I'm thrilled to have four amazing experts for the session today to really dive into what NFTs are and how the landscape is going to evolve. As we know, NFTs can be slightly controversial. On the one hand, you have people who are saying they're going to completely disrupt how we do things. They're going to enable creators to connect with their users in a new way and also monetize their art a lot better. New brands might emerge from NFT-based communities. But on the other hand, there's a lot of speculation, and there's the naysayers who say there's a lot of plagiarism and fake art channeling its way to people through NFTs. So really looking forward to unpack some of these topics and also find some ways going forward for the NFT space more broadly. But before we dive in, I'd like to give the opportunity to Doris, Nick, Sean, and Owais to quickly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about what they're working right now. So let's start with Doris.
Okay, thank you. So I work for Invest Hong Kong. I'm head of creative industries of Invest Hong Kong. We are a government body that helps a lot of international business in understanding the business environment of Hong Kong. The latest trends for me is in creative industries, as well as how to enter the market and establish the presence here. So we have 30 overseas offices, and we are also expanding. And we come across, from my side, a lot of very interesting creative business entering into the NFT market. I oversee a whole spectrum, including art and culture, design, architecture, media, entertainment, social media, marketing, advertising. And therefore, all these industries are being, you can call it disrupted, or they are actually entering or finding ways to enter these markets. So I'm seeing very interesting projects coming up.
Thanks, Doris. Nick?
Yeah, so thanks, Kiril, for hosting, and thanks, EmergentX, for inviting us for this panel. So everyone, I'm Nick. I'm one of the co-founders for Refinable. So Refinable actually began as an NFT marketplace, but we're moving more towards being a Web3 commerce company. So what we're actually looking to do in Refinable is to make Web3 a lot more easier and accessible for creators, business owners, projects, and brands to really enable anyone to start trading in a very decentralized manner through the use of NFT as a medium. So I think that's what gets us quite excited about. So super happy to join the panel to talk about NFTs.
Thanks, Nick. Happy to have you. Sean?
Hey guys, how you all doing? Sean here. Pleasure to be here, and thank you, EmergentX, for organizing this. But yeah, Talon is essentially an entertainment platform that is really focused around Gen Zs and millennials. We kind of have two key business verticals. The first one around sort of esports teams that we manage underneath the Talon banner. We have 7 teams in 5 different markets across AAA titles such as League of Legends, Dota 2, Rainbow Six, Overwatch, these type of games. The second part of sort of our business is really around this entertainment and lifestyle aspect, which are connected to what Gen Zs and millennials are doing with gaming and esports. And one of those verticals that we are building is within this NFT metaverse space, right? And how we can bring gaming and esports to the metaverse and to NFTs, and how we can leverage that technology to create new forms of interactivity with our fans and create something unique from an experience perspective for them as well. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sean. And last but not least, Owais. Sorry, Owais.
Thanks, Kiril. Yeah, thanks, Kiril, and thanks, EmergentX, for the invitation. By profession, I'm an IP expert, consultant, and academic. So I teach and I research in various IP related matters. NFTs, metaverse, Web 3.0 are something that's very natural coming to IP, and I realized that NFTs are something which are very interesting, especially in terms of digital assets and the current use case of digital art and digital works. And that's when I started advising Quick Trust as well, which was actually working on a platform to create another type of NFT, or let's say a better NFT, for lack of a better word, because we see a lot of issues surrounding anonymity when it comes to blockchain and DeFi. So the idea there is to actually create a new type of NFT which makes you discoverable, not discovered necessarily because of privacy matters, but making you discoverable if and when the need arrives. At the same time, there's also something I'm working on, especially at the intersection of NFTs and IP, especially copyright. So the idea simply is that to provide the buyer of an NFT the assurance that something that he or she is buying through the NFT as digital artwork is original and belongs to the seller, or the seller has the right to sell it. So that's why NFT marketplaces are very interesting for me, and to see how they actually function and whether there's any copyright infringement happening there. So, and metaverses will be even more interesting. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Owais. We have quite the multifaceted panel, so really excited to turn up a lot of these stones and questions around NFTs. I think we're going to be able to cover a lot of ground. As we go through the conversation, for the audience, do use the chat to leave any questions, and we'll get to those at the end during the Q&A. But let's start at the high level. And Nick, I think it makes sense to start with you, as you have quite a good oversight of what's happening with NFTs. Can you tell us what were you seeing when you started Refinable as an opportunity, and how that's evolving in your thought process going forward?
Yeah, so I guess I had to take a step back to really think about sort of where I came from and where my context is. So, in the last couple of years since graduating, it's always been about, tech startups and also in the e-commerce space. And I think if we look at the internet in general, I think e-commerce and facilitating commerce in, via Amazon, Shopify, or any other of these marketplaces is such a huge business of the internet. And I think when NFTs first came about in 2017, people were really thinking about NFTs and these crypto games called CryptoKitties. And I think in 2017, no one really kind of imagined what NFTs are really possible. But it was towards the end of 2019 and 2020 that I think a lot more conversation has been going around NFTs as a new sort of internet primitive, where you can actually use it as a medium of transaction for a lot of digital assets. And so coming from my background, that's sort of quite revolutionary to think about things like that, because previously you can resell a car, you could resell your house, you could resell a lot of things on the secondary market. But if you were to talk about reselling a particular JPEG or some fonts that I bought for a website, or even just a domain name, it's not as smooth or frictionless as, say, buying or selling a car. So I think if you think about NFTs as purely as a technological primitive to facilitate trade in the Web3 space, I think that is a very, very enticing concept. And the reason why it's quite different from, say, Web2 and traditional e-commerce sites like Amazon and, say, Shopify is that I think it does force a lot of brands to think about how they're actually engaging with their users on a digital strategy level. So I think Sean kind of alluded this in his introductions, where a lot of brands right now have been talking about digital transformation and digital strategies for the longest time to no avail, right? But I think now with Web3, you really have a much more stronger reason to kind of do it, because a lot of previous brands, they work in physical, they work in Web2, and it doesn't really transform well into a permissionless state. And so when it comes down to NFTs, you really have a new way, a new model of technologically building some of these applications and engaging with the users. Talk about Discord, you talk about NFTs, you talk about these marketplaces. And that's one of the core reasons why we started Refinable as a marketplace, is because, hey, we do see NFTs as a growing trend. It's definitely here to stay. It might not overtake Web2, e-commerce or Web2 commerce traffic, but it's definitely going to be growing. And I think a lot of brands are starting to pay attention to it. So that's one of the core reasons why we started Refinable, because number one, you want to facilitate trade in the future, make it easier for business owners to sort of get into Web3, and also just be a part of a huge movement that's quite pivotal in, I guess, in this generation.
Awesome. And Sean, would you agree with that? And what's your vision for more immersive experiences going forward, looking at it from a Talon perspective?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree with what Nicholas said. I think, it is really about creating these new experiences for fans, and specifically, I guess, for the esports industry, and what we're trying to do and what a lot of teams are trying to do is to focus around the collectibles, the experiences, and owning these things, granting you particular access to, certain things that you can do within a particular ecosystem. So, for example, we are working with various projects on trying to explore what could potentially work and what fans want to see, right? Some of them may be like a once-off drop, which may be like a physical to digital NFT link where it can be used in a particular metaverse. Like hypothetically, like one of the ones that we're exploring now is that we do a virtual skateboard or virtual NFT skateboard that could be used inside an MMORPG metaverse that can be kind of used like a mount, like World of Warcraft, where you can get around faster. And you have the option to burn it to become a physical NFT as well, which is done by a beautiful artist here in Asia, which is part of our office sort of decorations that we've done. The other utility ones that we've seen is, gaining special access to particular moments in time, a championship. If for Worlds or MSI, you can travel with us and be with the squad, and these kind of unique opportunities that can be presented. And like Nicholas said, you're going to be able to create all these unique utility and options for fans to interact. And given that, particularly for us, where it's essentially like a sports team, where we have a lot of fanatic fans who really want to be closer to the players, want to be closer to our staff, want to be closer to the experience, the offline experiences of these tournaments, then adding these additional layers of collectibles and with them being granted additional access points, I think is incredibly powerful. So I don't think there's a set answer yet for esports on how this is all going to play out. I think a lot of teams around the world are testing out to see what works. And I think we're kind of really excited to see how this all plays out, because I think the technology is going to be very useful for our space. And it's also very natural and native for gamers and people who are esports fans to be owning digital skins and digital items, right? Because as part of the gaming experience, you're already doing that. So yeah, completely agree with Nicholas, and super excited to see how it all plays out. And I think for the esports industry, it's going to be something that's going to be leveraged significantly. I think also in any sort of traditional sport and entertainment, music, these type of things, it's going to be really powerful.
Thanks. And actually, you mentioned a couple of things. On the one hand, NFTs would allow more creators, content creators, esports players to create assets that their fans can trade or collect and trade, right? On the other hand, there's a whole utility aspect of it, where people can get access to limited edition products or to different experiences that are attached to the team, whether that's online or offline. As a creator, do you have a preference for which one takes priority down the line?
I think right now, like the key thing is to there is honestly been a bit of backlash from the esports community around NFTs, particularly because I guess a lot of the community think it's a quick cash grab, right? And I think obviously with fans, they are our #1 priority when it comes to how our team is structured, right? Because they cheer us on, and everything we do is for them. And so, right now, I don't think there is a set way in which teams are approaching it. I think some are taking the approach of minting 10,000 NFTs and selling them as collectibles, and not really putting any utility behind it, and just saying it's something that's like a collectible card, which I guess you can also say is okay. And some of them are just giving them off as once-offs, like we won a championship, here's a commemorative piece, it doesn't cost you anything, you can just take it, and things like that. And some of them are creating metaverses, and some are creating utility around all these different things. And so I would say that, like, preference-wise, I don't think from what we've seen currently, there is no set way yet. I think there's still a little bit of skepticism in the esports and gaming space, but I think over time that should switch, because I think if teams really drive down utility, where there's actually something that can be gained, and you see things like Adidas Originals saying, hey, if you own the NFT, you get exclusive drops to, 1 or 2 drops a year that we have, which I think is incredibly powerful. And, Board Yacht Club, like my club, being able to own, like, go on the yacht club and meet Eminem or one of those guys that owns NFTs, things like that are incredibly powerful. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the drive in the future in regards to utility, because I think just the pure just JPEGs, I think is okay for now, but over time there's going to be a lot of evolution. That's what's going to drive a lot of interest for these particular projects, and I think for the esports teams. But yeah, I mean, short answer to that is there's no set answer right now. I think everybody is just trying to see what works and how the community reacts to it, because in the end, it really is all about the community that owns and supports this particular NFT or metaverse. And so listening to them and seeing what they think is the right way to go, I think a lot of teams are kind of navigating that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's quite interesting to what you said. We're starting to change how we think about using NFTs, simply from JPEGs to actually can we build long-term utility and use that technology to the benefit of the community and the fans. So with that, I think it's a great segue to ask Doris, because Doris, you engage with so many brands and the creative industry more broadly in Hong Kong, but globally. What are you hearing from some of the people you talk to, and what are they thinking about when it comes to using NFTs as part of their digital strategies?
Well, I think that's a very good questions, and I totally agree with what the other 2 speakers has talked about. There are some keywords in there, like immersive experience, engagement. I think these are very important. So when I talk to different kinds of companies or brands, they're trying to find new ways of engaging the new audience, especially the millennials or the Gen Z. And in terms of immersive, I think digital artists can create all sorts of immersive experience. And I just quote one example. We have a very recent digital art fair that has successfully debuted in Hong Kong last year. If for audience overseas that might not be familiar with this art fair, I must say in Hong Kong, it created a very good buzz in the art collection and art collectors because of the immersive experience that it brought in terms of introducing NFTs as well as digital and media art. Like, say, for example, content is always very important in any campaigns, I must say. And for Digital Art Fair last year, they have really good content. I'll just quote 1 or 2 examples, actually. One example is Sotheby's. They have a showroom of Rafik Anadol's, which is a very famous digital artist. He has his work, The Machine Hallucination, Space and Metaverse, which is a very immersive experience. It is a really breathtaking collection inspired by his collaboration with the NASA. And the entire collection was created by using over 2 million raw images that the space station and 2 telescopes, one is called the Hubble and the other is MRO. So these telescopes has captured a lot of different images in the space. And they created, or Rafik and his team created a very immersive and digital artwork. And it marks the first time ever these kinds of artwork is being offered at auction. And when people enter into the fair, they went into this showroom. Actually, it created a very different experience that they go to any art fair. And another interesting example that is also tied in with crypto is there's a blockchain piano. So it's being showcased by Henry Chu, one of the local artists. And this is a digital art installation. And the interesting thing is, and how engaging it is because it swaps between cryptocurrency and music. And it turns a real-time market price into a musical note. So when you actually, it is actually a physical piano being displayed. So when you press a key, you are also buying cryptocurrency when you press one key. So be careful not to press too many. And it uses music to disrupt the market in a way and also make market volatility becomes part of the melody, because you can imagine the cryptocurrency is very volatile all the time, right? So it is this kind of experience that will leave a very lasting impression upon the visitors or audience. And I'm not just seeing a successful debut of a new brand, the Digital Art Fair, but I'm also seeing traditional museums. They are trying to engage with new audience in a new way. So I recently had a conversation with a leading museum in Vienna via the Austrade. So it is through this Austrade conversation that I know that the museum is offering one of the world's most famous painting, Klimt's, the masterpiece, The Kids. So The Kids has now joined the Metaverse. And the museum has teamed up with actually a NFT investment fund, and they have fractionalized a very high resolution digital edition of The Kids into 10,000 unique digital fraction. And each cost is not expensive. Each costs around 2,000 US. And they are selling it in Valentine's Day last month, and with, of course, a limited edition at first. And buyers can buy in either crypto like Ethereum, credit card, PayPal, and it also breaks down the technical barrier that some of the collectors may not have a crypto wallet. And I guess it's these kinds of way of engaging with the audience that really makes all these kinds of new experience unique. And I'm not sure whether I still have time, but if I do, like traditional publisher like SCMP, maybe I'll just briefly explain a little bit. They have over 100 of years of history, a very famous newspaper in Hong Kong for those overseas audience. So you can imagine they have a lot of very valuable photos and news collected throughout those 100 years. And they now have entered into the NFT market as well. They developed their own artifact NFT standard, and they also have their first NFT drop, which is about the 1997 premium series, which is about the handover of Hong Kong in 1997. And it was sold out in 2 hours. And with this 1,300 boxes. So it's just the first phase. And that leads to another new investment. You can imagine a very traditional, or not very traditional, because they are always reinventing themselves. So SCMP now, they have a new company. They have spin off into a blockchain NFT business that is called Artifact Labs, which was just launched in March. So that's another new investment coming up from the NFT opportunity. So I've been talking too much, sorry. There's so many examples that I can share.
Yeah, no, the space is booming, and I thought you brought up a few really interesting use cases for NFTs, and also the SCMP example is quite fascinating in that, you know, a more traditional, if you will, a publisher is now launching an NFT arm, so completely diving into the space. But also, if you think about NFT as art, and you know, you gave a couple of examples there. One in which you have a piece of fine art that's now democratized through NFT and fractionalized to something quite more affordable. It's quite interesting. And then the other, which you brought up with the digital art fair, is how the whole cultural aspect of crypto and NFT becomes inspiration for artwork in its own right. And that can be quite valuable in the case of the piano. So those are very, very interesting use cases. But always putting your legal advisor hat on, and you know, we covered some ground here in terms of what's possible with NFTs. What should we be mindful of, and what are some of the gray areas around NFTs that people talk about so much? How would you approach that challenge? Oh, no, sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Kiril. And I'm really happy to hear what I've been hearing from Nicholas, Sean, especially the way they have actually built up their business and have been serving their communities. So I must congratulate them for that, and also Doris for InvestHK is doing a lot of things, and I've been following them on different social media handles. I'll zoom out a bit because if we'll start talking about use cases, it will take a long time. So what I'll do is I'll zoom out a little so that we can have some discussion with regard to, let's say, as I think you mentioned the gray spaces or the gray areas that we should be on the lookout for. So interestingly, even though the market's so big, and the market cap has also grown to multi-billion, there's still discussions around a question as fundamental as what does an NFT do? So that's still something that people, at least in the academic circles, with regard to what issues can emerge, people are talking about. So for example, we at times state that NFTs assert some kind of certification of ownership, and I have my own doubts about that statement itself. But then some people also come up and ask the next difficult question, which is ownership of what? So let's take the example of a digital artwork. So generally, NFTs can be applied on all digital assets for ownership transfer and ownership recording. But the easiest use case right now, or the most prevalent use case right now, is digital artwork. Does the NFT that somebody creates and sells and buys is an NFT of the original work or a copy of it? So some people actually say an NFT is not for the original, it's for the copy. And then the third, even more difficult question comes up, which is, then what's the point of non-fungible? The whole idea of non-fungible is scarcity. So if I am paying $600,000 or Hong Kong dollars or euros or pounds for a copy of something that one more person can also hold, what does that mean for the value for the NFT for myself? So these are the questions that are still out there, at least on, I don't think that Sean and Nicholas come across these questions that often, but at the end of the day, when it comes to that one problematic NFT situation where things end up in courts, these questions do come up. I think recently there was a court case where a buyer actually went after an NFT seller who actually offered the first NFT, and the buyer bought it for like $600,000. And then after a few months, they also sold two identical digital artworks under that NFT. And obviously, the first buyer was really cross, and because the value has gone down to, I don't know, according to him, to $30,000. Then beyond ownership, you also have to think about what are the rights associated with that digital artwork, that the NFT, if we assume that the ownership is being transferred or sold through the NFT, what are the rights that are being transferred? So that's another very important question. What can you do with that digital artwork, that NFT? Can you resell it? Can you change it? Can you make a derivative work out of it? Usually this happens through smart contracts. And what about those jurisdictions where the understanding of smart contracts is not very good? Will there be a conflict between the smart contract and what it means, and the conflict between copyright law by itself? Because at times there can be people who will sell and then see that the artwork has increased in value over time, and then go out and say, okay, this was not a valid sale. Even the seller can actually claim that in certain jurisdictions, not rightly, but obviously we understand that that will be morally wrong. But given that the legal landscape in many jurisdictions has not come to a point where the institutions or the regulators, even the lawyers, understand what this means. These are some of the questions that still exist, and we are also tackling this through by asking ourselves, what happens if somebody sells an NFT or a digital art, mints it on some platform and sells it to a buyer who does not know that this artwork does not belong to that person, okay, and then he buys it. What's the kind of recourse that buyer has? If I create another NFT of the same digital artwork and I'm selling on another platform, what can the original art creator or the owner or the seller can do against me? So these are some of the questions that we are still grappling with, and I can mention one more.
Yeah, Owais, let me.
Okay,
yeah, let me stop you here because I'm quite curious what Nick and Sean have to say about this, and whether you guys come across these kind of questions with the people you work with, or you're actually trying to solve some of these aspects as you're building out tools in Nick's case, or as you're launching products in Sean's case.
Yeah, I guess I can go first. So, us running a NFT marketplace, I think we definitely run into a lot of these concerns as well. And us working with all the partner projects, these are always questions that we always come about. So, I think the way I usually answer it is the question of, say, IP property rights and copyright and all of these things. Just because something is on an NFT doesn't mean it's going to sell, and doesn't mean it solves all your world's problems. The way I look at it is that it's a new type of digital asset that allows you to sell digital goods or digital media files in a very open and transparent way. So it doesn't really care with it any legal implications, just because legal is entirely subjective depending on which country of origin or country of publication that you're in. So I think it's the computer program doesn't really mind a lot of these things, but we do advise on a lot of people that, hey, even if you're a world famous painter, or maybe you're Krista Kim, you're Henry Chu with a blockchain piano, or Rafik Anadol, there's going to be people that are out there going to copy your work and sell it for cheap, right? And if you just go outside the Louvre, you see a lot of great imitation paintings from China of Picasso, of Van Gogh, and I think you're going to run into these issues no matter who you are or what medium you create on, whether it's digital or physical. But I think one of the major things that I think gets me really excited about Web3 is that with blockchain, there's a whole concept of being decentralized. And what that really means is that it gives you the power, or the end user or the purchaser or whoever the user actually is, the actual power to actually go and investigate whether something is real or not. Because everything on the blockchain is very public, you can actually go and do your due diligence to check, hey, I'm buying something from Rafik Anadol. Rafik Anadol's address is this. Does the address on the actual item actually match this? So everything is entirely transparent, and it gives a lot of responsibility and a lot of power to whoever actually works on this Web3 tool. Whereas I think if you compare it to even like traditional art institutes or art dealers, it might be very, very opaque about what you're actually getting. And I think even art people who verify art for a living, they do make mistakes just because the entire process is highly subjective. So on a very high level business sense, that these risks are going to be there no matter where you really are. But I do think NFT gives a previous section of creators and business owners a new avenue of transacting that is previously not possible before. I think just as an example, 20 years ago, the internet is still super, super young. There are these websites that, that still last today. And one of the biggest ones back then was something called DeviantArt, where essentially people can go on and basically just upload and share pictures of their digital artwork. And back then there was absolutely nothing on how people could buy or even make money off of this. People just did it as an interest. So I remember me as a teenager back then would just right click and save, because I just love, some of these artworks, and I will share it with my friends or something else with it. But for the creators at that time, making money off of the art was just insane to think about, because it's not a thing. And now I think we're in an age where, hey, we are thinking digital first. We have a generation that's brought up with these with esports, with Talon, with all these other things that are very digitally native, that people are thinking of ways to help support this ecosystem. And I think that's what gets people really, really excited, especially myself, where I'm probably one of the first digital art creators, because I have gigabytes of these artworks just stored on my computer. But I think the Web3 thing is it does provide new opportunities, but of course it does come with challenges, and these challenges I don't think are already solved with transacting off the chain or just in the physical world. So it's going to be business decisions that people have to make regardless. So I think right now it's quite optimistic about what it looks, and that's kind of what gets my team very excited as well.
Got it. Sean, what do you think about this,
I mean,
especially in the context of the rights?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I mean, kind of agree with what Nicholas has said. And the only thing I would say from our side, which is a little bit different, is around sort of, let's say, gameplay footage of an official League of Legends tournament, although it's our team. Who owns that, right? Obviously, most of the time, it's in the case it's Riot, it's owned by LOL Esports. But then if you look at platforms like Twitch and YouTube, if you're a content creator on Twitch, and you've seen a lot of NFT projects where they're clipping, the best moments of Twitch of that content creator, is that owned by Twitch? Is that owned by the content creator, right? So those are some questions which I think still need to be answered. And honestly, these aren't conversations that we have had yet or we necessarily need to have yet. But I think it's an interesting space to definitely see how the IP is owned, right? Generally for us, I mean, for the image rights for all our players and content creators, we obviously own it as an organization while they're with us, right? But then who is the actual ultimate owner? Is it Twitch? Is it YouTube? Is it, LOL Esports? Is it Garena? Is it Blizzard? Is it Ubisoft? I mean, these are conversations that need to be had. And obviously you've seen some of these collectibles where it's the NBA officially licensed or the UFC officially licensed and things like that. So, but for the gaming and esports side, I think it's still a little bit open, and I wouldn't say that we've seen any projects go specifically into taking the best clips of League of Legends and turning it into an NFT and then selling that on a marketplace, because obviously that would be incredibly powerful. I think I've seen one project where they've started to take stuff off Twitch and it seems to fly, so I guess the content creators probably do own the IP that they create. But I think it's for our space it can be a little bit opaque, and obviously we have to deal with a lot of third parties, with publishers, with game rights and things like that, so it's a little bit more difficult. But when it comes to just stock photos of our players and the content that we create, obviously that's a lot easier for us to manage and develop that. And of course, as Nicholas mentioned, it definitely provides a lot of transparency, but at the same time, there are risks associated with it, as with anything, right? And so I think it definitely does make it easier. And the key thing is, with gamers, they're all digital native, right? And they're used to transacting and buying skins inside a game and paying money for something like that. And so an extension of this, it's not too far of a step away, versus if I ask my mum to buy an NFT, she's like, what is this, right? And why? Versus if you explain it to a gamer, it's actually a lot more easier for them to understand and transact in that way. Yeah.
No, thanks, Sean. I think that's a great perspective, and it makes me think about some of the challenges with valuation when it comes to some of these NFTs being created, let's say by a streamer. If there's some ambiguity around the ownership or the rights associated with that NFT, how do you actually value it? And we're talking about a lot of money being transacted. So it's certainly quite interesting to see the evolution of that conversation. But Owais, I think I did pause you from posing another question or two about NFTs that you're thinking about. What were these?
So I totally agree with Sean and Nicholas. I mean, a lot of these questions are not popping up right now, and hopefully they will not pop up because people will be in a decentralized space, as Nicholas said, will be doing their due diligence. And the thing from the last comment was that, in terms of securitization, the securities law as well. So now there's, with regard to the NFTs, there's this concern that security laws may apply, especially in cases where there's a fractionalization of an NFT, and NFT being owned by more than one person. So that's also something that is also one should be looking at, that in certain jurisdictions there may be a state regulation with regard to considering these kind of NFTs securities. I think moving on from 2022, including 2022, but in future, I mean, I do see that the use cases for NFTs will explode, and I also agree that an NFT can in the best case scenario, be a representation of ownership. And if there's something which is a representation of ownership, is not only is transferable, but also licensable. Okay, so in my opinion, institutional adoption will get faster once institutions track it with regard to licensing the digital content. Yeah, because there's a constant stream of royalties coming in for the term of the copyright itself or the artwork itself. Yeah, so and that is long. And then couple it with smart contracts and decentralization and no need of intermediary to actually ensure that a transaction between the creator and the user is seamlessly happening. And if I'm using, for example, a song in one of my metaverses, in a concert, or in my pub or in my bar, and I can simply go to the creator and buy that song automatically, and the times I'm running it, the royalty is going back to the creator. Or pick up a digital artwork from Talon Esports or Refinable and put it in my metaverse, and possibly do it automatically. So these kind of things, and then the NFT goes back to the artwork goes back to Sean or to Nicholas. These kind of possibilities are very exciting going in future, and not only for digital artwork, but all different types of digital assets, or even physical assets represented on chain. Think of car rental. Think of other rentals from the real world, yeah. And think of Airbnb going all NFT. These are the kind of possibilities that exist there, and I think this is very this makes the whole space for me very exciting beyond digital artwork and digital assets.
Great. And so yeah, if you look at it, you think NFTs are going to explode in use cases, and we're probably seeing a lot more innovation that's going to happen. But switching gears here slightly, if we take that assumption that this is going to happen, then what does that mean for some traditional brands and traditional players? They would obviously need to work with someone to help them play in that space and develop some of these new use cases. So wondering, Doris, again, because you engage with so many players, what kind of collaborations are you seeing that might pair a more traditional brand or a more traditional celebrity or creator with a digital platform, or with someone to help them tap into the NFT landscape more broadly?
I think more and more traditional brands are now looking at new ways of engaging their audience through, or collectors or fans through NFTs. Apart from the ones that I've mentioned, there is also, like say, the recent example that I've talked to another clients, which is UCollect. And UCollect is a marketplace that sells NFTs featuring toys and pop culture. And they actually has just pulled 10 million fresh capital from Animoca Brands. And they have teamed up with one of the very famous British designer, Jimmy Choo. And Jimmy Choo has launched his first NFT collection. And it is sort of really not just a collaboration between the platform, UCollect and Jimmy Choo, but also the whole project is a good collaboration between different creative people from 3 different cities, from the UK, from New York, and also from Japan. Because Jimmy Choo has come up, or together with this creative team, has come up with a concept of launching his first NFT collection through launching one of its kind NFT product alongside 8,888 mystery boxes for purchase on the Binance NFT marketplace. And so you can either buy the very, very unique NFT, or you can also buy the 8,800 something pieces. And it depends on the very rare cards. So it has, like, say, over 400 super rare cards, or 3,000 rare cards, and 5,000 neutral cards. So it depends on the scarcity and how you value those cards. And those who buy those cards and boxes do not know what kind of cards they are getting. So it's kind of interesting how creative teams from different parts of the world can contribute together to come up with interesting projects. Because when you talk about NFTs project, it is not just being a localized campaign. It can be a global campaign. And so how you can tackle global audience or collectors or fans is very important. So I see traditional brands are now trying to find new ways of collaboration with different people from over the world, to engage with their fans, and also to create new base of fans as well.
Yeah, thanks, Doris. And Nick, on that, especially looking at the demand side, so global audiences for some of these projects, and we are seeing more brands experimenting or making big commitments in the space. Do you have a sense of the preference of the buyers or the traders of the NFTs between crypto native projects and brand backed or sponsored projects?
Yeah, so there's definitely a particular archetype of investors, just because in the last 2 years it's definitely where the first major hype cycle for NFTs has really been involved. So I like to look at things from a technological perspective, but I think definitely what happened in the last 24 months is a definitely cultural aspect of, a lot of young guys going into the space just because they're digitally native, they understand the cultural movement and significance. And there's definitely a lot of speculators that are going in for the last, 24-month period. But I think I always tell, my community and friends that I think that a lot of promises has been made in the last two years with all of these projects coming out. And I think the next, couple of years is really seeing if these projects can actually deliver on this, to really see if people can maintain that momentum. In parallel to that, I think definitely a lot of brands have been eyeing the movement, and they all realize, or they have an understanding of, number one, going into the metaverse or having a digital strategy for their teams to really adopt. But of course, a lot of brands don't really understand what that really means. So I do think for brands who can go in, they are contemplating sort of what the best way to do it is. But after, our team is also working on a few other brands as well. But I think a lot of times, what has been very successful in the last 24 months has been very, very community grown, grassroots sort of Web3 movement. So for a brand that has existing, reputation and legacy to go into some of these, I think the mentality and the mindset and the framework of how you run these projects is a little bit different, because you're not starting off the same ground. So there might be stuff that works in favor and might be items that don't work in favor for these brands, especially when they go into the metaverse or do these NFT projects. So I think it has to be very tastefully done. And I think the target demographic for a lot of these people that would be interested in brand-based, metaverse items or NFT items is definitely different, because brands will be having to sell to their own community to slowly bring them on board. Which brings me to another question is, if we're trying to bring on the next billion users to NFT, how does that actually look like? Because, NFTs is very retail based. However, engaging with blockchain definitely takes some education of setting up a wallet, understanding what keys are, what you click confirm or sign. So there will be a whole broad range of onboarding items for the companies, for the users. But I do think since this hype cycle is a little bit kind of coming down a little bit more, I would think that the next generation of these NFT users is going to be retail brands and their customers and their fan bases. I think we're starting with, great brands like Talon Esports. I think very digitally native, always forward thinking. But then as you move towards the stuff like LVMH or Adidas or Nike, it becomes a slightly slower kind of different grind, I would say. So I think it's all definitely in the right aspect, but you see a slight change in how brands are actually engaging with NFTs when compared to these projects that we've seen in the past, like Bored Apes or CryptoPunks or Azuki. I think it's going to be two completely different playbooks and demographic as well.
Do you think as NFTs become more ubiquitous, we're just going to stop calling them NFTs?
I think Owais actually mentioned this, like, the technical term is a non-fungible token, but technically that is just like the genesis concept. But as we progress, you can create NFTs that have many, many copies of it, right? We call them, pseudo non-fungible tokens. But at some point in time, it's going to change. But I feel like the acronym NFT sounds good. There's so much branding around it. We bought all these nifty domains, or people have called their companies NFT already. So it's going to be very hard to move away from it. But culturally speaking, I think it's still going to stick, but how people interpret it is going to be a little bit different.
Great. And I think we are nearing the end of our conversation today. But before we break, wanted to ask each one of you if you have a resource that you'd be willing to share with the audience. So whether that's someone you follow on Twitter or a Discord server that we should be joining, a blogger or a book that you've read, which would be very useful for people wanting to learn more. Starting with Nick, maybe going down to Owais, Doris, and we'll end with Sean.
Yeah, so I do have a recommendation for this, but it's more largely based on sort of business and digital transformation and more strategy stuff. So one of the, I guess, people that I like to follow on Twitter is Naval Ravikant. And I think he has a lot of very interesting insights into how Web3 space is kind of changing a very high level landscape of how business and art is being done. So I think something like that is something I would recommend on a pure appetite level. Because I think some of the ideas that he has is quite mind-bendingly interesting to read in, especially with how Web3 is disrupting Web2, what the similarities are between historical contexts. So I think that's something that I would definitely recommend.
Yes, sir.
From my side, there's a very interesting handle on Twitter by the name NFT Theft, at NFT Theft. So I think that's an interesting handle to look at. Just on the point of what Nicholas said about pseudo NFTs, we call them fake NFTs. So yeah, a little bit more direct with that. But yeah, so at NFT Theft is an interesting Twitter handle to follow.
Thanks, Owais. Doris?
Okay. I think I would like to suggest our audience to take a look at a recent report that PwC has done together with Invest Hong Kong. So this is a more wider perspective on the digital transformation of a lot of creative companies that are based in Hong Kong and their success stories. And it will give our readers an idea about the digital ecosystem of Hong Kong. So it's for creative industries, driving innovation and future growth. It is a free publication and a free report that can be downloaded from our website, investhongkong.gov.hk. So that will give some, hopefully, our readers some more information about the broader perspective of how creative companies and business are doing in the digital transformation process in the last 2 years.
Awesome. And Sean?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit biased here, but like I will say, like I mean, Yat and the Animoca Brands Group, I think in Hong Kong is a super interesting space to keep an eye on. I think the key thing is it's how they're putting all the pieces together on building something where you're bringing together esports, entertainment, gaming, metaverse, NFT, game publishers, blockchain gamers, traditional game publishers, and how all that world is all going to come together. They've made an incredible amount of investments, obviously probably too much to track, but just to see the buckets that they're putting their ideas in and how that all eventually merges together to really drive sort of Web 3.0 and the entertainment space together, I think is really interesting. And the type of brands that they're able to bring into that space, I think is going to be really interesting to see. And I think, obviously a huge success story in Hong Kong, and, also, they've grown amazingly well, and we're part of that ecosystem, the esports component of that. But we're really seeing a lot of great synergies between portfolio companies and how we're creating new sort of opportunities to link different communities together, which I think is very valuable.
Awesome. So Yatsu and Animoca. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, a real treat to have a chat with you today. I learned quite a bit, I have to be honest. Some really cool use cases for NFTs, starting from esports and streaming, creating artisan limited edition products. to digital art, and Doris shared the story of the digital art fair in Hong Kong and creating immersive experiences that can be sold through NFTs, and also some museums are fractionalizing fine art and distributing that through NFTs. And then, yeah, thanks for sharing where you see Web3 going and getting into more of the technicalities of how you see the space evolving. Of course, there's still a lot of questions. That's my other big takeaway, that we need to be thinking about and discussing. A lot of business decisions that need to be made, which will help us think through and value these digital assets better. But questions about ownership and creating NFTs with copied artwork or with ambiguous rights that are attached to them are all going to be really important as we think about exploding the use cases and exploding the number of companies and players in the space. So super interesting. And then thanks all for sharing the resources. I'll definitely follow NFT Theft. Sounds like a great handle to follow. And with that, we break. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks again, EmergentX, and looking forward to seeing the end of the conference today.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks, Kiril.
Bye.
Thank everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.